everyone, I'm Vicki Odette and this is Tattoo Talks, my new podcast where we tattoo and interview our guests at the same time. Now my first guest is so exciting. It is Darren Mcgarvey, the author of Poverty Safari, award-winning author, and today we're here to discuss his latest book, which has just been released, called The Trauma Industrial Complex. What are you getting today?
Well, my wife got a tattoo a few months back in the same place on her wrist, kind of bracelet style, and she had the astrological symbols for my son, my daughter, and me. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing the same, except I'm swapping out Taurus for Virgo.
Yeah, for hers.
Yeah.
Is she happy that you're? She must be thinking that's quite nice.
Well, yeah. Well, for
quite,
my wife,
very romantic.
For my wife to get
You're happy for
a tattoo that symbolises a partner on her is really significant.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be nice to reciprocate the gesture.
And we were talking about your wife before and about how she's finishing her PhD.
Yeah.
And you were advising her about kind of the same of finishing off a massive body of work and how stressful that can be. Your last book that is just out, The Trauma Industrial Complex, how was that? Was that once it was out, was it a relief, or is it now still a lot of work to try and promote it, or do you feel like it's done now, or?
Well, every experience of writing book has been different, and I'm learning now that maybe that's the process. It's a bit like kids. You think you know what you're doing after the first one, then the second one comes along and they've got a different personality and they've got different needs, and then you're like, oh, that's right, I don't actually know anything. But with the third book, it was an interesting process because ultimately, topic-wise, it should have been the hardest book to write. Mm-hmm. But actually, once I cracked what I was actually writing about, then it was the simplest book.
Difficult because it was so heavy on talking about trauma, obviously, and
it's personal.
Yeah.
But also, I really understood the assignment. Mm-hmm. I was like, I know why I'm telling these stories. Every disclosure of my traumatic experience is advancing an argument and a thesis. It's not just being told for the sake of it. And then also with this book, I think I felt a bit more confident to try and be creative and engage the reader critically while they're reading it.
Yeah.
You're using stories to immerse the reader, almost like fiction, and then you're breaking the immersion to bring them back to a state of consciousness about the fact that they're reading a story, and to cast a critical eye over that, and what relationship do they have to the text, and why are they reading it? Yeah, what brought them to it. Exactly. Yeah. For those who have not came across the term trauma industrial complex, or they've not heard the phrase, can you briefly tell us what that means? So it's a term that came, I think it would have been Eisenhower, American president, who I think in one of his final speeches as president was warning the American people about this new entity that was developing in the United States that sort of has a will of its own. That on one hand it's there to serve people, but on the other hand it has its own interests and its own agenda. And he called that the military-industrial complex. And now we have other terms that explain other industries like big pharma. It's this idea that once an industry gets so big, it can start dictating its own terms to the population it's supposed to serve. Yeah. And so the trauma industrial complex, I guess, is it's a play on that, just talking about really the scale of the conversation about trauma, which is industrial, in the age of social media. Yeah. So social media is great because we can get information quickly, we can communicate. There's so many benefits to it, but also it's not very well regulated, and anywhere that it intersects with health, it becomes problematic. If you look at people with a wee trigger warning, I'm going to talk about like eating disorders and stuff like that, right? But people who have suicidality, people who have an eating disorder, people who self-harm, people who have drug addictions, if they go to social media looking for help, it's Russian roulette, the quality of information they're going to get. And most people watching will also know what it's like to go on a fitness journey and they want all the information to get slim. Basically, most people just want to look good naked, right? But that's not always healthy, the advice you're getting.
Yeah.
And so really, anytime lifestyle or health comes up on social media, you've got good content creators who know what they're talking about and they're careful. And then you have people that are just trying to make some quick money fast. And the information they put out can be dangerous. And the book really tries to warn people, not just about that, but also if you do really want to heal from trauma and understand it, here are some things I've learned.
Yeah, the alternate, like what you can do instead. How do you think we're coming to this place of the kind of oversharing the narrative of the trauma? Like, what's pushed us? Do you think it's the social media platform to feed themselves, or is it our need to overshare? Have we got more of a need in this day to overshare our trauma? What do you think?
Human beings have a natural urge to communicate with each other and express themselves to each other. And like many of our natural human needs, this gets sort of hacked by technology. So the reason social media is the biggest booming industry, you know, I mean, you're talking about tech platforms being bigger than, you know, the oil industry was. These are the new oligarchs. And what they feed on is our natural human desires and how to monetize that. So the attention economy, how we communicate with each other, political discourse, we're all jacked into this now. And that's in some ways a good thing. But the negative side of it is that when it comes to a thing like trauma, for example, the way social media platforms trauma is usually just somebody telling a story about something that happened to them.
Yeah.
And that's really important. It's important to get that identification. But then a lot of people who are just early doors, maybe in recovery from addiction, recovery from some kind of abuse, that's what's being modelled to them as they're telling the story.
Yeah.
So they start to think that telling the story is how you get well.
Yeah.
But actually, if you're not healed and you're still vulnerable, and you put the story out there, it can snap back at you in ways that you're not expecting. And if you're in trauma, that can be very distressing.
And there's no safeguarding. The social media platforms I've not known any that have any type of moral codes or something in place to safeguard these people that are sharing. And especially in your book, I read that great thing that sometimes oversharing is a symptom of trauma. And if you're in it and you're oversharing, and you don't know what people are going to say back, what are people going to respond to, and that is such a dangerous place. And the difference between sharing your trauma with people that are trauma specialists is massive. What are, do you think, the worst dangers that could occur for, like you just discussed it there, but like, is there's any that you've noticed from your own perspective of sharing your trauma?
Yeah, well, I mean, even in the book, I think a pertinent example everyone will identify with, I make reference to Eminem a lot in the book. He was a formative influence in my life as a teenager when my identity was still kind of coming together, and I was in this transition from leaving Pollock, where my identity had been forged, and being kind of wayward in Glasgow. And I was really into hip hop, and I identified very strongly with his story, but so did millions of other people.
Yeah.
But if you actually study Eminem closely in his life, aside from his music, the thing that made him so compelling was all the personal information he was putting out there about his mum, about his girlfriend, about his daughter. And then if you actually follow the trajectory of his career, the level of fame that he ended up achieving wasn't actually part of his plan.
Right, okay.
And the obsession of his fans wasn't part of his plan. And now he lives like a prisoner in his own life.
Yeah.
Who nearly died from overdosing. His wife tried to commit suicide as a result of things he disclosed in his music. Him and his mum never got along later in life. And I'm only using that example, one, because I've just watched that Stands documentary that's just came out, which is all about that.
Oh, right, okay.
But also second, because most people know him. But that's probably the most pertinent example of someone who has overshared and experienced negative consequences that people could relate to. In my own experience, the negative consequences that I've had, it might be distant family members who I hadn't even thought about getting in touch to dispute with me, details of things that I've said or characterisations of certain people, which can be distressing, especially if you're kind of plagued with self-doubt. I'm the sort of person that if someone wants to bullshit me or gaslight me, they could do it quite successfully, because I always would be more inclined to think I might be the one who got it wrong rather than the other person.
Which is essentially a result of trauma itself.
Yeah, you have this kind of intermittent sense of...
I'm the bad one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a consequence. And then also for me, and this is not necessarily like complaining, but there's just an unwritten rule just now in a lot of the work that I do, that it will contain some element of autobiography, lived experience, that I will draw from my own experience to make a point or an argument. And unlike a fiction writer where they create a character where they can distance themselves, I've got to be front and centre all the time. No, everybody's going to go through that. Everyone's career will arise out of that, but increasing numbers of people will, for example, log into Facebook and tell everyone about a suicide attempt that they've recently had. Now, they're just trying to disclose that and get it off their chest in a way that seems normal to them. But there might be people in their family who didn't even know they were struggling, who are just like, what, so all these fucking strangers, you're telling all them before you told us? You know? And there's just all ways it can sort of ripple out and cause problems. So I try to give people reading the book a few basic points about, if you do want to talk about something publicly, here are some things you might consider.
Yeah, I thought that was so important, because I mean, I feel as if a lot of it has been there where we want to share and then it's not been the right result, and then you're saying, who are you sharing it to? You're actually talking to a phone, essentially. Your brain doesn't understand that as well. So, and when you're in a therapeutic situation, it's completely different. That the room that you're in when you're with a professional, the temperature is measured, the doors are locked, there's water, there's so much going on when you're going to share it in a professional sense, and you're safe. The internet, when you're sharing it, isn't necessarily, you can't provide, say that it's going to be safe.
Yeah, and just with things like virality, I mean, think about that, the story just a few days ago with this young girl in Dundee with weapons, and you've got half the population looking at a girl brandishing two weapons and seeing her as someone who's deeply distressed, someone who needs support and care, and then you've got another half of the population which is excited at the prospect of a young girl standing her ground against harassment with a hatchet and a blade. At the end of the day, that girl's face has been beamed around the world. It's been retweeted by billionaires, and that breaches basic child protection. Do you know what I mean? But it's like social media. People will see that, and other children will think, I could be patriotic vigilante. I could be celebrated. I mean, I'm already carrying a blade, so it might as well. Now it has meaning, now it has purpose. Social media can just be reframed and recontextualised. Your story's no longer yours. The thing that happened to you is now other people's property to use however they wish. And if you put a story out there that's deeply personal, and you're vulnerable when telling it, then that can actually stir up your sense of vulnerability once you see that it's not yours anymore. It's like toothpaste you're trying to get back in the tube.
It's made it even worse, because like you were saying, and which I loved about the trauma industrial complex, is that when you share the story, it can be edited, it is no longer belongs to you. It can be changed, it can be made fun of, it can be made into a meme, you know, and you're absolutely right how dangerous it is. What would you say, I know you put alternatives about social media, like what you can do in a safe place, but is there, we just spoke about, which I loved, the EMDR, about basically trauma, getting help for trauma in different ways. Is there any specific trauma therapy you have had that you would advise if somebody's desperate to share? Instead of sharing, is there anything else you would say, like if we can have access to do something else?
Well, the first thing I would say is, whatever it is you're struggling with, there is already a mutual aid support group in your community that probably deals very specifically with that issue. Whether it's online or whether it's a physical meeting that you can go to, right? So if you're dealing with addiction, any kind of addiction, drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, you're going to find in this city of Glasgow at least one meeting a week, right?
Yeah.
And the whole process of getting well is going into a room with other people who struggle with that and talking about your experience and how you feel. So this is how disclosure and sharing is really important. But there are parameters with all of those meetings. Who you see there, what they say, you don't repeat that.
Yeah.
You have a right to say you were there. You don't have a right to say anyone else was there.
Yeah.
So anonymity, real core principle. But when you do dealing with social media, obviously we're not anonymous straight away. That's part of the deal of doing it. But in an impulse, a moment of impulse where we feel comfortable, we could disclose something, we could regret it later.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it makes sense for us to try and over-regulate Facebook and Twitter. I mean, governments can't even do that. So the best thing we can do is regulate ourselves.
Yeah.
And that keeps us safe. It's knowing when to share. And then also the book tries to explore sometimes our ideas about what our stories mean, or even what's happened, the nuts and bolts of our experiences. The mind is not always a reliable hard drive.
That's what
for
trauma
objective
does
reality.
as well. Like you see, like even in an accident in the street, the police try and come straight away to get the eyewitness account straight away, because the brain starts to make sense of it and change the narrative straight away. And I think that that's what is wrote in your book, that is so dangerous, because the narrative may not be true, and that's not to say that the truth of the story or they're not being authentic. It's just that so many other things come in to make you feel safe.
Well, think about it like this, right? So you're putting my skin through a trauma right now, a physical trauma.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. But what
A
I'm
nice
saying,
one.
right? So say like we're here, we're doing this, right? Now, say later on, right? I go away and something happens to my skin or something. I know it won't because you're super professional, right? But I'm just talking about how stories can change, right? You're having a nice interaction, you're talking to each other, you go away, you bump into somebody, oh yeah, I know that person, they start talking shit, chatting shit. The memory you have of your experience gets overwritten, it gets implanted with something else. Then you tell the story to other people, you recall the memory. Every time you recall it, you change the memory, right? So if you have a memory of something that happened to you when you were 5, something did happen, but there's lots of narrative that you've implanted into it, like what the intention of the person was, what the culpability was. Before you know it, you might be running with a story that's actually more painful because of all the layers you've added onto it. And that if you actually got a bit of clarity about it, then you might feel better. But because the trauma industrial complex or aspects of it have this almost sort of this kind of, it's your story, this is your story, and this is your truth. What they're really saying is the objective facts don't matter. It's what you remember. It's what the story you tell yourself that matters. And I mean, people are entitled to do that if they want. But if we're not living in the truth, then we experience distress. It doesn't matter. Like a lot of people walk around with anxiety and depression, and they don't know what's wrong with them. And unfortunately, sometimes it's because they're living out of alignment with the truth of their lives. They're up to stuff in their life that's not good for them. They can't accept it.
And even when you're in a professional therapeutic sense, even I myself went to focus groups as well, and there's no comparison. It's amazing to go in and finally speak to somebody and share your story, and it's messy and it's not edited, and you say things that you don't think you're going to say, but it's protected, and the place is protected. But when you're sharing trauma online, you are then going to edit it to then you might not think you'll look good during it. There's a lot of not natural ways to share. It's very unnatural also that, like I'm saying, you're talking to a phone. The brain is not work. You're not connecting with another human being, and connection and safety is how we heal.
So and that's one of the big key takeaways for the reader is people who talk about trauma publicly are seen as the absolute apex of authenticity. But if you're someone whose actual job it is to constantly tell a story about your own life, there is a kind of authenticity in that, but also you've selected the version of the story subconsciously or consciously where it's hitting all the marks that you need it to hit. So you're more like a writer or a performer or a director rather than just, you know, Joe Blogs coming talking about his prison time or whatever. And that's okay. But then people go to lived experience, people who talk about their life, say they've done time, say they've recovered from addiction, and they start to see that person as the same as every other person who's gone through that.
Yeah.
But actually, the people who want to talk about it publicly, we are a separate group because most people wouldn't be caught dead talking publicly, and it would terrify them, the thought of it, and it would create a kind of trauma, just the idea
to
of it.
expose this.
So we're not representative.
Yeah.
We're our own thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The word trauma, you speak about it at the trauma industrial complex, is becoming, there's a great word, you said pornographied, is that what it's called?
Yeah, pornified, yeah.
That's it, sorry. And I thought the word trauma is starting to lose its meaning because we're using it so all the time, constantly. And what do you think the major dangers of that is?
Yeah, well, it's that's a phenomenon that's referred to as concept creep.
Right, okay.
And it tends to happen with words that usually mean around mental health and certain human behaviour. So like words like bullying or words like addiction or anxiety or more recently trauma. So there's a sort of clinical designation of the word and where it originates from. And then there's when it becomes part of people's common vocabulary. So actors talking about the trauma of having bad reviews.
Okay.
So they're conveying that it was distressing for them, but they're also debasing the word trauma. Because a trauma is not just a sort of, that's a bit sore.
Discomfort.
Or a bit embarrassment. You know, it might link to a trauma, it might trigger a trauma, technically, but ultimately, like, when you suffer a real trauma, it's a debilitating thing that you've got to recover from. That you've got to either integrate or it just becomes part of your personality and you forget about it, but it has with it a lot of life limiting beliefs. And so the word trauma, while you can't control how people use it, those of us who do use it in the context of health have to use it appropriately. Just to be always reminding people who want to know, here's what we really mean by this.
Yeah, 100%. How's the tattoo? Is it okay? You feeling
Feels
okay?
great, yeah.
I kind of forget that I'm tattooing. I'm just kind of like looking at it and I'm
doing
like, it's not too painful. So another thing you were talking about, the therapy you went under was EMDR, and you're working with Marilyn, your child psychologist, and her husband. I've only started hearing stuff about this recently and how transformative it is. Can you discuss that about how it could help communities and also how it helped you personally?
Yep. Well, EMDR, first of all, is eye movement. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yeah, there's another one like it as well. Something. So, but I don't know if it's the same thing, but I just, because it's the eye movement thing and the tapping.
Yeah. So
what's it about?
Well, basically there was a mental health person, Francine Shapiro, many years ago. She was having a bad time. She went out for a walk, and I think she was tracking something in wherever she was walking, maybe a leaf blowing in the wind or something. And then she noticed how her level of distress went down as her eyes moved from left to right. So then she started to investigate this, and then there became clinical trials, and basically a lot of the evidence over the subsequent years started to point to the fact that what was referred to as bilateral stimulation.
Okay.
So basically, EMDR is a way for us to slowly begin to engage with the distressing traumatic memories, and then to reprocess them. So when people live in trauma, what happens is the trauma is in the front part of their brain, the waking part of the brain, and it means that anytime the trauma is triggered, your body starts to feel as if the traumatic thing's happening again.
Yep.
So think about it like, I don't know what sort of things might trigger someone. Say someone got mugged, or say someone discovered that their partner had been unfaithful, or say someone had walked into a room in their house and found a dead body of a relative,
Yep.
right? after those events happen, the person who's experienced that, their body has taken a kind of physiological photograph of how everything was when that terrifying thing happened.
Okay.
And any time anything in the environment is similar to that, it sends a distress signal that goes right through your whole body, right? So trauma's not a story, it's that physical sensation, and then the mind tries to make a story about it later.
Yeah.
In order to process that, sometimes time helps, support, family, people who understand and can attune to you emotionally and support you. But with very extreme forms of trauma, then sometimes you need a wee bit extra help. And so the EMDR, like a lot of therapies, you establish a relationship with a therapist, a kind of rapport and a trust. I believe that's partly the secret sauce, right? Just feeling seen.
Yeah.
When you feel seen and witnessed, that's a soothing effect on the trauma. Because something that makes the trauma more acute is the idea that people don't know what you're going through, or worse, when they dismiss it or minimise it. That's really painful.
Yeah.
So the EMDR is basically a process that has a lot of careful protocols, because when you're working with trauma, it's a very volatile force, so it has to be done right, and that's why sometimes this online therapy stuff is real risky.
Yeah.
There's certain protocols that have to be adhered to in order to do it safely, but ultimately the therapist will talk you through discussion to find out what the real traumatic memories are, and then you might work from the least traumatic to the most traumatic over a number of months.
So see, when, this is what I was thinking about the EMDR was, is it just one trauma at a time that they can speak up? Say, for instance, you've had a massive history of childhood problems or abuse. Would it just be, can you do that as a whole, or is it one specific, is it different specific things that really traumatise you?
I think it would depend on how the individual frames their experience.
Yeah.
So if an individual frames chronic abuse in the form of just a relationship, so it's symbolised by one person, right? So say it's a caregiver, right? There might be hundreds or even thousands of different incidences of abuse or neglect.
Yeah.
And so that person might have, the narrative they've got about it is just that this person is unsafe, or this person is an abuser, or this person was just horrible to me. They've forgotten all the different incidents.
Yeah.
So then what the EMDR would do is they might take that person, that symbol, and then they would try and come up with what's called a positive future scenario. So what you're looking for is the antithesis of what that person represents.
Yeah.
Can you think of a safe person? Who's someone safe in your life?
Yeah.
So for me, it's my granny.
Yeah.
Right?
I love you talking about your granny.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
So it's like, you know, when I was doing the EMDR, and I even went back and did a wee bit more recently, and it was all around my granny. And then any time I do the bilateral stimulation, I can feel a kind of surge of resilience in the face of whatever it is that I'm dealing with. And ultimately, they try to think about it like a hard drive, right? You're taking it off your desktop, you're taking the trauma off your desktop, and you're putting it in a removable hard disk, and you're just putting it away.
Yeah.
But as long as it's on your desktop, it's pulling at all your memory, your daily memory, you know what I mean?
Every decision, every movement almost with trauma is, and I think you mentioned something, I can't remember one of the books because I've read them all quite quickly, but the one that you were saying, like trauma, there's a lot about, especially children trauma, and you've had child abuse, that you don't really know that's trauma. You're not really aware, and that's why sharing in areas like social media is so dangerous, because that gets sometimes exposed to in a professional sense, or in these focus groups, or in the EMDR. And if that then becomes an awareness whilst you're sharing online, how terrifying is that? That you've only worked that out whilst you were sharing.
And cultural differences, whether between social classes or whether even between ethnicities, countries, whatever, these can also be factors in trauma. So in other countries, things that would be considered traumatic here might not be considered traumatic there, and vice versa, right? So some of the practices and ways that we do things in the UK, despite regarding ourselves in a very high-minded way, you know, in other countries, if you look at how they do education or how they do criminal justice, if you look at the Nordic countries, they have a far less traumatising experience for people engaging with public services, for example, the welfare state. school, they try to remove as many of the potential re-traumatizing things, because what they're concerned with is not necessarily making things hard for people, to remind them don't ask for help because it's too expensive, like we do here. They understand that you actually save money and you have a more harmonious society, the less trauma is happening. So cultural differences make a real big difference as well.
Even when you're talking about, I've just had a baby, and even when you're talking about the Nordic countries and how they look after the children and the parents and the mums, and that causes the time for the mums and parents to nurture their children, and then we know that nurture creates like a better society, less crime. But you're absolutely right, the way that the Nordic countries, the criminal justice system is less punishing, more about reform. And I think that if you had, say for instance, an ear to the policymakers of the UK regarding like how to go forward with trauma, what would there anything you'd say to stop doing, or is there anything that you'd say that you should start doing now?
I think kids should be going to school a bit later.
Yeah,
just that our education is all set up to get mummy and daddy back to work and being good, productive little wage slaves as soon as possible. So the kids get funneled into education, quite a hardcore educational environment. Kids should be learning through playing, maybe until they're about 6 or 7, socialised. Then that gives time to identify any additional needs that they might have in terms of neurodivergence or stuff going on at home that's impacting how they are responding in a classroom. But in order to do that in this country, then you would have to have a big culture war in the conversation.
It's massive, isn't it? Because you don't really realise how intense parenthood is until you have the children, and then you realise that, oh God, it's this, get back to work, and the kids need to go into nursery, they need to go into school, and that's really preparing them for a workforce, not necessarily for their own personal, their selves. They're not really going to learn anything about themselves. They're going to learn how to become workers. So there's it's a huge shift, isn't it? So,
and the first thing you would do, the first thing anyone who becomes successful, i.e. they have a certain amount of autonomy over when they work, and they have a bit of disposable income to create a lifestyle that supports whatever they think is important, right? That's what success looks like, whether you're rich or whatever, right? The first thing most people buy is more time with their kids.
Yeah, that's what life, it just feels like you get so much from it. Nurture for yourself. Exactly. As a parent. And I think people talk about child nurture, but I get so much nurture from nurturing, and knowing my child it fulfills me so much. But when there's pressures of work and pressures, that gets taken away. And that's can cause so many problems with regards to bringing up children. I forgot about your tattoo. I'm like too busy. So in the last one, your trauma industrial. I'm saying the last one. It's not your last one. I'm sure you're going to write tons more. Are you going to write tons more?
I think I'll keep writing. It's just like I definitely feel these 3 books are sort of a certain chapter. I literally kindled the last one, so I'm feeling bad that I'm not got it here in a car coffee. Oh, it's all
where
good.
Can you get?
It'll be everywhere. Every bookshop.
Right. Okay.
Maybe not every WH Smith.
Why not?
Well, they will stack. They've got certain books that they stack, and it's the ones that are selling like a bajillion copies every week.
Oh right, like the kind of.
And the bigger ones you might get it, and you'll get it maybe like in airports. But try and get it from an indie bookshop if you can. You know, your local indie bookshop, because they really benefit from that. And
even like charity shops, I go in and you see a book and you're like, oh, it's like £1. How amazing!
Exactly,
is that,
but if people are buying a book new. Obviously the convenience at Amazon, it's hard to resist sometimes, and I'm the same when I'm buying things. But support indie bookshops if you can, because they're the ones you get a very personal experience with those as an author and as a reader.
Most people have read a lot of they know exactly, they've read the books.
If they get behind your book, it really matters. It's like having your clothing in the shop window. You know, your brand in the shop window. If they get behind your book, it makes a big difference to the book really having legs, as they say.
So in the book you've said that you're retiring low-key. And is there when I was reading all your books, I felt like low-key was such a protective persona
Yeah.
for you. I don't know if that's true.
No,
but,
it's true.
That he protected you, and I think when children have been through and your lived experience of trauma, you need a protector, and that's what happens. So how do you feel now that it's Loki's released and retired, and that you're now not got that part of your identity?
Well, it's like I took that name on as a teenager to kind of, I guess it was a way for me just to sort of try a different persona, you know? And I was very influenced at the time by hip hop, and a lot of hip hop artists, they'll have alter egos that reflect different sides of their personality.
Yep.
And I used to write poetry under the name Loki in a book that no one will ever see, but then the name just caught on, and for some reason, as ridiculous as the name sounded then and how odd it was, because other people back then, names like some of the names are in, my mentor Big Div, right, or Psycho D, do you know what I mean? And then it's like someone's cutting about named after a Norse god,
Yeah.
But the name, I don't know, no one ever questioned the name. It seemed to suit me, and people still call me Loki.
Yeah.
Even like Shireen Nanjiani, you know what I mean? Like, I'm showing my age now. Some of you might not know her. Shireen. She would call you Loki, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be a second thought. So the name was useful in the beginning, but I think as I got more into my addiction, I started to forget that this was a artistic projection of me, and you start buying into the idea that this is really you. But a lot of the traits that a lot of people might have remembered Loki for in the hip hop scene, they're not necessarily parts of myself that I want to be telegraphing all the time.
Yeah.
Can be a bit of a dickhead sometimes with a drink in me,
Yeah.
Like never I would say like proper abusive or anything like that, but just arrogant. Arrogant and mean and putting other people down to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
Or seeing conflict where there is none.
Yeah.
Or try to create conflict because I want to make myself look better. And I in sobriety, when I engage in those character defects, I always feel bad after it.
Your books there's so much apology in your books. And I personally felt that you were so hard on yourself because of what you're being through.
Big character defect of mine.
Yeah, like really, really hard. I was like, oh, he keeps on saying sorry, and there was so much. Even when I first opened Palvich Safari and I read that what you said about your family, the first page, I was like, oh my god, this is that's so sad, And I thought it was really beautiful, and it's so important that the messages you're putting out, especially the middle bit. I love the social distance between us. I love because it was so political and important, and your lived experience books as well. It's so important to have people from Glasgow that's had your experience to have a voice, because we don't hear it a lot. So, and at the end of the trauma industrial complex, you were talking about the change and this kind of how you've changed your life. And when reading it, I felt as if it was almost spiritual. It was almost like, I think Edgar Tolle talks about it, letting go the need to be special. Now you're always going to be special, but letting go this absolute race for it, the
attachments.
I've got to be special, I've got to be something. Does that make sense to you when I was reading that?
Definitely, because obviously I sort of allude to it in the book. I went through an experience while writing the book, which was kind of ironic in the sense that I suffered a really difficult traumatic event.
Yeah.
And it was like weirdly bringing me back to remind me what trauma really is, and to be very careful when talking about this topic. Because, some of the stuff online you'll see, it'll irritate you. If you've had a hard upbringing, and you're seeing a bunch of poshos talking about the trauma of bad reviews, and it's just like, fuck off. This is my kind of trauma. Trauma's fucked up and I'm fucked up and fuck off. Right? But see, if you write a book about trauma in that kind of mindset, you're actually going to turn a lot of people off and create a lot of harm. So in a weird way, what I went through brought me back to a place of reasonableness
Yeah.
about the tone and taking it very seriously, but it also reminded me the bodily reality of trauma.
Yeah.
And what it also did was, it gives you a chance to reassess. There's a lot of things in your life that you take for granted. There's a lots of things in your life that you think, all right, well, it's just going to be like this now.
Yeah.
And then something happens.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, no. That's not how it is. And that's when you go, well, what is important? If it was all on the table right now, what is important?
Yeah.
And for me, I was realising that pursuing validation externally through work was burning me out. It was causing friction and distance in a lot of my relationships. And it was leaving me with a feeling of emptiness inside. And I just saw the book and my recent experience as an opportunity to go, do you know what? I don't need to be anything that I don't want to be.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people project onto you when you're in the public eye. They read your book or they read your opinion column and they think, well, this is what they are for me.
And this is what they should do for us.
But do you know, see the people who really support me, like you, who buy the book, who read it, who come to the show, they're so nice and understanding. See the people who do fuck all, but criticise.
Yeah.
They're the ones who always pipe up. Why are you not saying anything about this issue? Why were you when this issue, as if you're just there to perform for them, their little political performing monkey.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no man, fuck those cunts, man. You know?
I think you're absolutely, this is where healing really, when you really have when I am done with being something for others to serve, I'm serving my family, I'm serving myself.
Yeah.
And when success does that, I think, to people, and it's why we hear so many celebrities going, having mental breakdowns because even Lewis Capaldi, this pressure of I have to perform and be amazing and do as good as what we did before. And then you realise, okay, who is this for and what's this doing to me? And I feel as if when I was reading the Trauma Industrial Complex at the end, I thought, oh, I felt so good for you. I was like, oh, finally, it's just went, fuck off, everyone else.
Yeah.
And it's where then you can be truer and do the truer work. And
it's letting go of that attachment, isn't it? For other people to co-sign whatever it is you're doing. So I'll still do whatever I want, but even the people who will read the book and will be like, oh no, that's a contradiction, and oh, you said that in the book, so why are you doing this now? It's just tuning out of all of that. It's just going, do you know what? Fuck off.
Anyone that nitpicks the book, this is your truth and this is how you, I don't understand when people just do that. I just think, okay, just read it and then let it go. I mean, even in social media, when people really harass people, you're like, you don't need to do that. There's always kindness. Just, you don't like it, that's cool. Move on. But I think that so what you've done is, especially at the end when I felt so good for you, I was like, oh, he's finally went this full, way. And when you, in the middle of it, when you had that crisis, and I thought, oh God, what success looks to people. People think you're successful, you've done this book.
Exactly.
And you're successful, you're well known, but you won't have a trauma anymore. And that was so interesting to me, that success isn't money. That's what we were saying, and it's you can still have trauma and you can still go through this terrible experience. You can when you're talking about, I feel bad when you're talking about Central Station, and I was like bringing you here, and I'm like, it's right next to Central Station,
right down there.
And when you had that trauma experience, and I just feel like, wow, the idea of success, and that's I think a lot of social media people share, to be this successful influencer or to successfully make it go viral. But when you brought it back to, actually, I'm going back to my family and to my children, and I think that was a beautiful kind of ending to this amazing story, which I want everyone.
Yeah, because that is the success.
Yeah, is to have these people that love you right there.
For me to be able to go, do you know what? I could be pursuing more lucrative opportunities and more fame. I'm very well networked. I'm known in all the industries I'm in. People know I do a good job, and there are people out there who. They are pursuing them, and you see them on telly all the time. Yeah. The people on telly all the time, they're not there by accident. They're instructing agents to lobby hard to get them on panel shows, to get them in newspapers, to get them doing corporates. They work all year, and that's fine if that suits them. It doesn't suit me, so I'm happy to take a hit on the opportunity front. by not signing up for things that I don't want to do.
Yeah,
I don't want to do a tabloid documentary style thing when I go and live in a fucking prison for a month for, you know, and just like, that's the sort of thing that would just get greenlit like that. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, no, I'm not. My nervous system is like, is having palpitations at the thought of it, and it's not even because I'm frightened in that environment, it's just because it's so meaningless. It doesn't say anything about prison, it doesn't say anything about criminal justice.
It's entertainment, and it's not progression at all.
Exactly.
But I absolutely loved your book, and I really, all of them, but especially in the trauma industrial complex for what's going on the now. And so the last questions I'd like to ask is, what's next for you? What's the next? I mean, you're working with the community. I think this is amazing for you. You're working with your community, and you're working. Is it the call lines you're working on?
I've got to get back in. So when I was writing the book, that's all what I was doing. And then in order to do the fringe, so I was doing. As part of our recovery, we do service in the community. We understand, we learn that that's part of how we repay what was given to us. Is that
alcohol recovery or is that trauma?
I'm in a fellowship that deals with all mood and mind altering substances. So whatever you're suffering from, you can come to that. But I'm kind of forbidden by the traditions of that fellowship from saying what it is, right? But it's very close to the start of the phone book. And basically, when you get well, you do service, and that helps to keep you well. But due to the commitments of work and the fringe and all of that, I had to sort of drop some of the commitments, because every week you're having to phone and get somebody to stand in for you because you've got a big bit of work to do. So this next period, really what I've got is, I've got the events in October with Frankie Boyle, Mary Black, Nicola Sturgeon. I've been getting pelters on the internet for days. Apparently these are 3 Marmite figures. Who would have known? So you've just got, and then I wrote an article criticising racism. So I'm getting it in the neck on Twitter. But it's quiet for me apart from those events, really. I've got Tidelines Book Festival in Irvine, the end of September. And then, London, Edinburgh, Glasgow in October. So if anybody fancies coming along, it's a bit more expensive than anything I've done. I'm not making any extra money off it. It's the price you pay for someone else to run the event and do it professionally and make a memorable experience. So I know a lot of my crowd might be priced out of it, but I put plenty of stuff on that people can afford, and I write plenty of stuff that people can read for free.
Here, and you're doing this for me, so I'm so grateful. I was going to ask you about basically how parenthood and like how that's changed a wee bit, but like if you could go back to, well, not ask you about parenthood, but ask, if you could go back to yourself when you were a wee boy growing up in Pollock with who you are now, if you could give them one piece of advice about healing, resilience, what you can, where you were at that time, this is quite a hard question, but what would you say to yourself like 10, 15 years ago, back to where you, before you wrote The Poverty Safari, when you were going through all that really tough times?
I'll tell you something that I probably haven't said before. See, when I think about that wee boy, it's really hard. It's really hard. See, in my Fringe show, I use a photograph of myself at that age at the end of the show to show what it is that I've disassociated from in my life, where the local persona comes from. And so even just thinking about that version of myself, that iteration, it's hard. I'm still learning to accept that that's me. That's where the parent question coming in. See, since you're being a parent, is it become more hard? Well, being a parent's the thing that stirs it all up, right? So I'm looking at my son. I write about this in the book. I'm looking at my son. I look at my kids playing, and then sometimes I have like an intrusive thought about some kind of harm coming to them, or them being frightened of me. And then I'm like, and then I have this mixture of sort of relief, because I know I would never hurt them in my right mind. And then I also have anger, because I'm like, how could someone have hurt me when I was that size?
It puts it into major perspective, and I think that I do it too. Weirdly, I used to have a wee picture when I was really struggling, a wee picture of me and my phone of a wee girl. And I just remember be like, this is who you're parenting again, this is who you're loving, and it brings you back, but it's very much separate, and it's weird,
hard.
it's very hard. And I think that trauma and healing is never ending.
Yeah.
And it's just life, and you write about it so well, and I think that people can heal from can really take what you're saying and how important your books are. And I thank you for writing.
No, thank you. This has been great. Good
I know
job.
That's your tattoo, Dan. I'm like, I actually did it pretty quickly, but how do you feel? How do you feel like you liking it?
Brilliant. I love it.
Loving it.
My wife will love it as well, which is what matters.
So this is all about her, and yeah, she's going to be so happy.
Yeah.
I know, that's so good. I know. Well, that's us. Thank you so much, Dan.
All good.
Coming in.
Good
I'm
luck
so
with the
glad
podcasts.
The tattooed you.